So I, 27, female, was the maid of honor to my sister-in-law, Christina, 25, female, a couple of days ago. I've been married to her brother, Martin, 28, male, for about a year now, after 4 years of being together. Martin's family actually likes me, except for Christina. She has never taken a liking to me, and I've never been able to figure out why. I tried to be nice to her initially, but she was just so uptight and mean that I stopped trying. She reminded me of all the mean girls I've had to deal with in high school and college, and I knew better than to try to befriend her, because I knew that that would never work. So she used to ignore me, and I used to ignore her, and that's the way it was. Martin was upset about it and tried to get me to be her friend a couple of times, but when he realized that the efforts were not being reciprocated from her end, he didn't try anymore. And nobody else cared enough to force us together because it's not like we were kindergarten kids. So, to sum it up, Christina and I have never had a great relationship, and I never expected her to change either. It came as quite a shock to me when, a couple of months ago, she asked me to be her maid of honor. I wasn't really into the idea and told her that I needed some time to think, but eventually I was just going to turn it down. For starters, she and I barely even knew each other, and she'd made it very clear to me in the past that she didn't like me for whatever reason. Also, being a maid of honor was a duty and commitment that I didn't think I was ready to take on for Christina of all people. I was going to say no, but I did speak to Martin about it before I declined, and he told me that he actually believed that it would be a good idea for the both of us to spend some time together. And agreeing to be her maid of honor would be the perfect opportunity for us to do so. I was pretty reluctant, but Martin convinced me and said that if Christina had asked me to be her maid of honor, then that meant she was extending a hand of friendship towards me, and now it was up to me if I wanted to take that hand or not. So after a lot of deliberation, I decided to give it a shot, and I regretted it within a couple of weeks. She was pretty nice to me after I agreed to be her maid of honor, and it felt like a welcome change from her usually cold and gloomy behavior around me. We had a lot of fun planning and going out for brunch together, but then she asked me to buy her the wedding dress. It was a $3,500 dress, and even though it was pretty, I don't think it was necessary for her to buy a dress that she couldn't afford, especially after her mother had offered to let her wear the wedding dress she had worn for her own wedding and had even allowed her to get it altered to fit her better. She told me that she couldn't exactly afford the dress with her current salary, and it didn't fit in the wedding budget, but she had her mind set on that dress. She practically begged me to buy that for her because she knew that I had a much bigger income than hers. She told me that she couldn't tell her parents to buy it for her because they were already contributing to the wedding. She couldn't tell her fiancé because he didn't think it was necessary for her to go out of her way and buy a wedding dress when she already had one that her mom had allowed her to use. And it was a really beautiful dress, too. She could talk to Martin about it, which is what I suggested, but since I was her maid of honor, she thought that she'd ask me first, because she knew that I earned more than he did, and it would be easier for me since I was the designated rich relative. For the record, I'm an investment banker, so yes, technically I do earn more than most of the people in her family, but there's also the fact that I'm not exactly her family. We're not related by blood, and I certainly don't think it's customary for the sister-in-law or even the maid of honor to buy the wedding dress for the bride. I tried to make up some excuses, but she was so insistent that I couldn't bring myself to say no, and I agreed to buy her that dress, as long as she paid me back the amount in full afterwards. Luckily, I had that conversation recorded on text where she agreed to pay back the amount, so now I can use that against her. I bought her the dress and she was thrilled. She was extremely nice to me, even more than she was to the other bridesmaids, who were her friends, and I felt great about it. It was a lovely couple of months until the day of the wedding when she finally went back to her old self in the worst way possible. Not only did she start behaving coldly towards me again, But this time she actually chose to make fun of me and humiliate me among her friends and other guests. The ceremony went well because there wasn't much talking involved in that anyway, but she had started distancing herself from me right from the morning of her wedding itself, and barely even spoke to me before the vows. Then, after that, while she was socializing with the guests and stuff, she dragged me along with her to meet everybody else. But then she only made mean jokes at my expense, which made them uncomfortable and made me feel awful about myself. She was ridiculously mean and made fun of everything, right from my appearance to my personality. She made fun of my weight, my nose, my social anxiety, and even the fact that I'm a bit of a perfectionist. It was crazy because it was completely unprompted and didn't make sense to me why she was doing that, especially after we had such a good run before her wedding, and I'd almost begun to believe that she was my friend. So I confronted her about it in person in a corner and asked her why exactly was she being so horrible to me all of a sudden. She laughed it off and said that I was just being silly and that she wasn't making fun of me, she was just introducing me to her guests. Even then, I told her that her way of introducing me was kind of mean and I didn't appreciate it. So she rolled her eyes at me and told me to stop being so sensitive about everything. She said that she wasn't being mean. This was just her sense of humor, and if I couldn't handle it, then I probably should not be friends with her, and walked away. I stood there for a while because I was shocked at the way she was behaving, and then I lost my temper and did something that I probably shouldn't have. I was only standing a little way off the stage, and I could see that the band was still setting up, so the mics were not in use. And in the heat of the moment, I walked up onto the stage and delivered a speech that I kind of regret. Once I was on stage, I had everybody's attention, so I just started talking about how Christina had asked me to be her maid of honor a couple of months ago, and I'd said yes because my husband and I stupidly assumed that it would be a nice opportunity for us to finally get along. I mentioned that Christina had been quite cold to me before that, so I'd been looking forward to actually becoming friends with her. But unfortunately, Christina was also such a nasty B word that it was impossible to be friends with her even if one tried. Then I brought up how Christina had begged me to buy her the wedding dress that she currently had on, and then I said that judging by her behavior on that day, I think she'd only asked me to be her maid of honor so she could get that dress. And given that I was her highest earning relative, she probably had to suck it up and be nice to me for a couple of months just so she could have the dress that she wanted. I realized after a while that somebody had cut the power to the mic, so I started screaming out my speech instead, and I could see security trying to make their way through the crowd to get to me. People couldn't see it, but I still brought out my phone and showed everybody the texts, which I had screenshots of. I called her a tacky, ungrateful, and psychotic bridezilla, said that I was glad that I wasn't her friend, and then walked out of the venue myself before security could even touch me. I could hear her crying, and that brought me a great deal of satisfaction, so I didn't even look back and kept walking until I reached the bus stop that was closest to the venue. I didn't even check my phone until I was already on the bus that went home, and when I finally did, I realized that I had about 100 texts from my family. My parents had been invited to the wedding and had seen everything unfold. They wouldn't exactly be accusatory, but they did sound very confused in the text and told me to get back to them as soon as I could. Martin, on the other hand, had just sent me a couple of texts saying that what I'd done was insane and that we needed to talk once he was home. He also told me that after I left, Christina was pretty much inconsolable and everything had come to a halt for about 10 minutes while everybody tried to calm her down, and he said to me that I owe them all a huge apology. All the other texts were from irrelevant relatives of theirs who were only getting involved because they wanted to be a part of all the drama and gossip that would inevitably happen after this. I ignored all of it and headed straight back home, made myself a cocktail and ordered a burger since I didn't get to enjoy the wedding or eat, and then decided to have a fun afternoon to myself while watching television. I did not respond to a single call or text until the evening, because I didn't think that it was important for me to talk to anybody, especially when I was in that state of mind. I felt insulted, humiliated, and used, but I also did regret the way I behaved because it was nothing short of psychotic. I had a lot of conflicting feelings, and I didn't think that I could talk to anybody or explain this at the time. The only people that I thought I did owe an explanation to were my parents, Martin, and my in-laws. Not Christina, though, because she knew exactly why this happened. Martin finally came back home at around 9, and he didn't even say anything to me when he entered the house. I waited for him to freshen up and get changed into comfortable clothes and assumed that he'd talk to me after that. But almost an hour passed and he still didn't come to me. So I decided to break the ice first and approached him. He was on his phone and stonily ignored me when I walked into the bedroom where he was lying down, but that wasn't going to stop me, so I did exactly what I did at the wedding and just started talking without overthinking it. I explained to him how Christina had been insulting me throughout the morning, and I even gave her a chance to apologize. Or at least just reassure me that she wasn't going to continue making fun of me like that just to get a few laughs from her guests, because it was humiliating and I didn't like it. But she told me that I was making a big deal out of nothing, and that's what really pissed me off. Especially since I was the one who bought her that dress, even though I didn't have any compulsion to. And yet she couldn't even be a little grateful to me and was acting as if I was the one who was overreacting. That made me mad and I couldn't hold back, so I revealed that to all of her guests. So essentially, I just did what she was doing to me, but the only difference was that I had the mic and she didn't. I thought that this would be enough of an explanation for Martin, but he didn't say anything and continued to ignore me, so I snapped yet again and told him that he needed to talk to me. That's when he finally looked up at me and told me that he could understand that I felt humiliated, but that was still no reason for me to ruin her wedding day. Because it was not just an event for them and it reflected poorly on his entire family, and I hadn't even spared a second to think about him and his reputation among his friends and family before going ahead and screaming my head off at a public event just so I could get my petty revenge. He told me that my behavior was unacceptable and that my reaction to what Christina did was actually far worse than whatever she said. He told me that I could have dealt with the situation in a lot of better ways, but I chose to do the most unhinged thing. And after what I did, he couldn't just talk to me and treat me the same way unless I apologized to him and his family, especially Christina, because despite whatever she said, the fact that I ruined her wedding still stands. I thought it was ridiculous of him to expect that I'd apologize to Christina, because in my opinion, she was the reason behind this entire mess, and I just reacted to it. Granted, I might have taken things a little too far, but she was the one who started it, and it was crazy to me that he wasn't blaming her for anything. So we got into a fight over that, and I told him that I was not going to apologize to anybody apart from maybe him and his parents. There was no way that I was apologizing to Christina, and he could be mad at me if he wanted to, but that wasn't going to change my mind. He told me that I was acting crazy and unreasonable, and he could only talk to me once I decided that I'd be less irrational. It's been a couple of days now and we haven't spoken to each other, and I'm beginning to think that I might not exactly be in the right here. But I really just don't want to apologize to Christina, and even though I can apologize to Martin and his parents, I don't think I need to say the same for her because she was the one who screwed up first. She was downright horrible to me, and in my opinion, she completely deserved what I did, and I don't think that after that sort of disrespect, anybody would want to apologize to her. But as much as I hate to admit it, Martin also does have a point, and I could have dealt with it better, which I didn't because I was really angry. And now I just don't know how to feel about any of this. So AITA for delivering a really mean speech at my sister-in-law's wedding and making her cry? Update 1. Hey, so some of you have been asking me if Christina had reached out to me after the wedding debacle, and to answer that, no, she hadn't. and neither have my in-laws. Also, to make it clear, I really don't know why Christina doesn't like me because, contrary to popular belief, she and I had never met before I started dating Martin. So no, there was nothing from my past that could have led to such an intense dislike for me. And I genuinely have no clue as to why she hates me so much. I would also like to add that I wish nobody judged Martin and my in-laws just from what I said, because all of them are actually wonderful people and have always been great to me. We're going through a rough patch right now because of whatever happened at the wedding, but before this, all of them have always been lovely to me, especially Martin. And even now, Martin is just standing up for his family. I can't comment on whether what he's doing is right or wrong because I haven't made up my mind about that yet, but it's not like he is being cruel to me, and neither is he being hard on me. He's always been a wonderful partner, and just this one disagreement is not enough to break us. So please stop hoping, praying, and suggesting that I file for a divorce because that's definitely not going to happen. Thank you. Update 2. So it's been a week, a really difficult week too, since the wedding. Martin and I hadn't been on speaking terms for one whole week, and today I finally gave in because I do think that I messed up. And even if I didn't apologize to Christina, I did need to apologize to him. Because I ruined a family event that was a pretty big deal for them. After we were both back from work today, I decided to bring it up at dinner and told him how sorry I was for losing my mind at the wedding, and I also told him that I was going to talk to his parents and try to make things right with them as well, because they didn't deserve this. And I knew that their relatives were probably having a field day making fun of my meltdown at the wedding. But I also made it very clear that I still wasn't going to apologize to Christina because she was a horrible human being and I didn't want anything to do with her. He was quiet for a while, but then he told me that it was fine and that I didn't need to apologize to her. He was just really mad the other day, so he was being unfair and realized it much later. He just sounded exhausted and told me that it had been a really hard time for him because he was facing backlash from almost everybody in the family, and the only person he wanted to talk to about all of this was me. But I wasn't even talking to him, so it had been a pretty miserable week for him as well. He told me that his parents were furious at me, and he didn't think it was such a great idea for me to apologize to them right now, and advised me to let them cool off a little bit before I talked to them. He also said that he was really annoyed with his uncles and aunts and other relatives because they had nothing to do with this. But for whatever reason, they felt that it was their place to comment on me, and they called me really derogatory names in the family group text. He told me that he left that a while back, but his parents keep sending those texts to him to remind him how the family feels about me now, and apparently they want me to apologize to Christina and the rest of the family for my behavior. I'm honestly okay with apologizing to Martin and his family, but I am not apologizing to Christina under any circumstance whatsoever. What she did was not okay, and she's the one who owes me an apology first. I told Martin that I was ready to apologize to the family, even after whatever they called me, but I was not apologizing to his sister. To my surprise, he actually told me that I didn't need to apologize to anybody at all, because if this incident had taught him anything, it was that all these people cared about was their own selves. He called them all selfish and answered that he didn't think I needed to apologize to anybody because I wasn't answerable to them. He said that apparently he tried to tell his parents and the other members of his family that it was actually Christina who instigated and provoked me into doing that. But none of them were ready to believe it and just labeled me a psycho without even hearing my side of the story. They were sure that their little Christina was just incapable of being cruel to anybody. And so Martin knew that there was no point in trying to reason with them. He knew that they would just use the apology as a way to humiliate me even further, and he wasn't going to let that happen. He told me that he still stood by his initial stance and still believed that what I did was not okay, but neither was Christina as innocent as she was being made out to be. And so he told me that I shouldn't apologize to anybody, And even if I wanted to apologize to his parents for the sake of my own conscience, I should properly do it when they'd be feeling more receptive and open to it. Because if I do it now, then it'll be pretty pointless. So I guess it worked out pretty well for both of us. It's not perfect and it's not ideal, but at least I was able to get this off my conscience with Martin, and at the end of the day, what matters to me is what my husband thinks of me. Everybody else can just go to hell. Update 3. Hey everybody, I know a lot of you guys have been asking for an update, but to be honest, there's not a lot that has happened ever since the last one. I mean, after Martin and I made up, I pretty much stopped worrying about what his family thought of me. He got a promotion at his work, so we decided to take a little vacation because we were both really stressed, and that was about it. As for my own parents, I explained everything to them and they were okay with it. They weren't concerned because this doesn't have anything to do with them, and they're just glad that Martin and I are getting along and we made up soon after our fight. That's all they really care about. Neither Christina nor her parents have been in touch with me, and I honestly think that it's for the best. My in-laws were wonderful to me when I married into this family, but now I respect the fact that they're choosing their daughter's side over mine, even though she's in the wrong. It's their personal choice, and I'm not going to hold it against them. Update 4. So it's been a month since my last update, and today I received my money back from Christina, which was a pretty startling discovery because I'd almost forgotten about her and the wedding debacle. She also texted me because I hadn't blocked her, and I finally found out the real reason behind why she didn't like me, and it's just as stupid as I had expected it to be. Apparently one of her friends had a thing for Martin, and she was just about to set him up with her brother. But then he brought me home and introduced me to the family, and so her friend ended up getting heartbroken and she blamed me for it, which is why she didn't like me. That friend of hers really liked Martin, and she'd liked him for a long time. But after our first year together, she realized that she'd never have a chance, so she moved out of state for work and is doing a lot better now, from what I've heard. I don't know how any of this is my fault, but I guess with Christina, she just needed a reason to dislike me, and she picked that. I would have much rather not found out the reason at all, now that I know that it's something this dumb. I told Martin about it, and he told me that he always had a clue, but he could never see that friend of hers as anything more than his little sister's best friend. So even if I hadn't been in the picture, they still wouldn't have gotten together. But whatever. At least it's all over now, and I don't have to talk to Christina ever again. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.